After 2 days, white smoke appeared, and the word came down. The papal conclave had elected Father Jorge Mario Bergoglio the 266th Pope. His first decision, to be known as Pope Francis. Here now to tell us what his election means for the direction of the Catholic Church, we're joined by Alicia Ambrosio, host of Vatican Connections on Salt and Light TV. Buonasera.
Buonasera.
Nice to have you here.
Good to be here.
Well, did you expect this?
No, not at all.
Habemus Papam, but not the one you thought.
No, not at all. In fact, I've been telling everyone that we made up our lists of papabile, those who are most likely to appear on that balcony. We basically took the list from 2005 to begin with and started crossing names off the list. And one of the first names we crossed off was this Jorge Bergoglio.
Now, why would you do that? I thought he came second last time.
Well, that's the rumor, but he was already the same age that Benedict was when he was elected himself. So we thought, okay, if we've got a pope who's retiring because he feels like he doesn't have the strength to go on anymore, why on earth are you going to elect someone who's the same age as the retiring pope was when he was elected? So we just completely crossed him off the list.
All right, but put yourself, if you can, put yourself in the heads of the cardinals and answer the question you just asked. Why would they pick a man who's 76 years old and presumably hasn't got long in the job?
Well, we have the benefit that several of the cardinals have been talking about this already. And they're saying when they went into the general congregations, which are these meetings that they have before the actual conclave starts, and this is where they talk about the current state of the church. Where are we? Where do we need to go? What do we need to do? They realized that there were a couple of different things they needed. They needed, first of all, someone who was humble and just exuded holiness. They needed someone who had firm ideas and a very clear vision of where the church is and where the church needs to go, and someone who would just basically stick to his guns. And now, leaks are starting to come out of the Vatican. Shocking, I know.
That's unbelievable.
Oh, yes.
I understand why government departments leak, but the Vatican leaks? Yes,
like a sieve.
Yes. Okay, what are you hearing?
Leaks are already coming out saying that Cardinal Bergoglio actually gave a couple of presentations during those general congregation meetings. And when he spoke about the current state of the church and what the church needs and what we need to do in order to transmit the faith. And the cardinals started to see in him, this guy's got the right idea.
He could do it.
Yeah.
Would you infer from that I'm really not trying to be disrespectful here, but would you consider that campaigning for the job in some respects?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, these general congregation sessions are really just kind of a moment to share ideas. And the concept behind it is if we discuss the state of the church long enough and we kind of discuss what we need in a pope, everyone will get an idea. Everyone will have a couple of names in mind. And then, of course, when they go into the conclave, when they go into the Sistine Chapel, the belief is that's when the Holy Spirit takes over. So everyone's got these different ideas in mind. They've prayed about it. They kind of, lift it up, put it in the hands of God, and maybe they'll all have the same idea. And if they all have the same idea without actually overtly campaigning and lobbying, well, then it's got to be something not of this world.
Gotcha. There has never been a Jesuit Pope before. He's the first.
Yes.
Why has there never been one before?
Well, that we'd have to ask the cardinals who were in previous conclaves. But what we can more or less hazard a guess at is one of the key features of the Jesuits is that they are known for this humility. So they've actually been known, and I've had Jesuits tell me, we actually don't like positions of power. So if someone tries to put our name on a short list for an Episcopal nomination to be a bishop, we run in the other direction. That's just not in their nature. They don't look for positions where they're going to be in power. There's this other neat factor that the Jesuits, I mean, for people who don't know, they're an order of priests founded by Ignatius of Loyola, very focused on missionary work and education and simplicity of life. Okay, so one of their vows, they take the usual vows, poverty, chastity, obedience, but they take a fourth vow of obedience to the Pope. So that presents the cardinals with a little bit of a conundrum. You've got a Jesuit taking a vow of obedience to the Pope. What happens if we make him a Pope?
I gather at some point when the name is picked and he's got the 2/3 plus 1 vote, there is a tradition of asking the man who's been selected, do you actually want the job? Do you have any indication whether they asked the man who has turned out to be Pope Francis whether he wanted the job?
We know that they did. Yeah, we know that they did. They have to. To make the election valid, they have to ask, and he has to say yes.
And he obviously said yes, which puts him at a difference from all of the other Jesuits in the past who may have been asked and declined.
But we don't know.
We don't know,
We
right.
don't know if there were any asked.
Right, good point. Tell me your reaction to the video you have seen coming out of Latin America in general, and I guess Argentina in particular, to this announcement.
I've seen a little bit of video. I mean, as you can imagine, I've been busy here and there covering things, but the little I've seen is this spontaneous expression of, oh my goodness, the hand of God. We saw it once in the World Cup, here it is again. Here it is again, and it was very spontaneous and heartfelt. Now, my mother is from Argentina, so the first thing I did was to call her and tell her, Mom, the Pope is from Buenos Aires. And her reaction was pretty much what we're seeing on television, this like hysterical scream of, I don't believe it. South America is, like the rest of Latin America, kind of forgotten at times. And the people of Latin America often do feel forgotten by Northern Hemisphere-centered world.
Which is odd, because the most Catholics in the world are there.
Exactly, exactly. So this felt like, finally, they've seen us, they've heard us. And there's going to be a focus now on what we need. In the North, in North America, in Western Europe, we get into doctrinal issues. We have fights in the church over how we should worship. Should we worship in a more traditional fashion? Should we be facing the congregation? Should the priest be facing the congregation or have his back to the congregation? You know, in Latin America and South America, they don't care. There's still economic disparity, there's still poverty, there's still political corruption in many countries. And what Catholics are worried about there is, you know, God, get me through this day. Help me survive to the end of the month.
But I was struck by I can't remember which reporter reported on this, but she was in a restaurant when the announcement was made, and spontaneously, everybody in Buenos Aires, spontaneously, everybody got on their knees, started praying and rejoicing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we might do that here in Canada for hockey, you know,
Yes.
in an Olympics, but short of that, it's hard to imagine what would get people to do that.
But that's the intrinsic response, that's the natural response. We've just been given a gift, we get down on our knees and we thank God.
Why has no one ever picked the name Francis before?
Well, it has kind of a mystique around it. So it comes from Saint Francis of Assisi, and he is this man who came from a very wealthy family, young man, gave up all of his wealth, all of his family's wealth, and decided that he was just going to walk through the country, travel from town to town, preaching the gospel, living off of whatever people would give him, whatever he could find, whatever he could make do with. He became known as being like the patron saint of, he was the guy who preached to animals. It's said that at one point he was trying to preach to a crowd of people, they weren't listening to him. He said, well, to heck with that, I'm going to go preach to these fish in the pond. And he starts preaching to this pond full of fish, and the fish start coming towards him. So there's such a power around the name of Francis.
And he's trying to evoke that.
Well, I don't think he's trying to evoke the power. He's trying to evoke the simplicity of St. Francis. Okay. But there's such a power around the idea of St. Francis that why would you want to mix that with the figure of the Pope, who is just as equally revered in so many cultures? I mean, and then there's the issue that in Latin America and Italy, the St. Francis is an icon. St. Francis is next to God and the Pope. So it's just one of those things that he has such a big mystique on his own. It's one of those names you just wouldn't want to touch.
Remind me the last time a Pope stepped down as opposed to dying in office. I mean, it's hundreds of years, right?
600 at least.
600 years at least. So Pope Francis has to figure out, I guess, what Pope Emeritus Benedict is also going to be doing now. Does he have a further role right now, Benedict?
Well, Benedict has already said that he really just wants to retreat into a life of prayer. He feels that the best way for him to support the church, to guide the church, is through prayer. A man of Benedict's formation, it just has a very deep belief in the power of prayer. So for him, going into a monastery for the rest of his life and spending his days in prayer is just as powerful as sitting in the papal apartment signing documents, if not more effective. And as he said in his last general audience address, it's more suitable to my age and energies.
Well, you can just imagine if Benedict were to give an interview in the future in which he were to say, well, I wouldn't have done it that way. You know, I mean, it's
Yes.
theoretically possible, and I wonder whether any of these potential complications have been thought about.
I think that's why he's decided to retreat into this monastery and just spend the rest of his days in prayer, writing theological documents and theological books. We know that he was working on one final encyclical, which is a papal letter, and we've been told that he will probably finish that and we will get to read it. It won't be issued as papal teaching or a papal statement. It will just be Cardinal Ratzinger's theological thoughts.
Will we get to see those?
We've been told we will.
Huh.
The Holy See Press Office has said we will get to see it.
Interesting. Okay. We saw some pictures earlier as we were chatting of those first moments when Pope Francis appeared in St. Peter's Square, and he did some things that many Vatican watchers said were very unusual. Can you make a bit of a checklist for us?
Okay. So he stepped out onto this balcony and he was wearing the white papal cassock. And if we look back to when Benedict XVI walked out onto the balcony, he was wearing the papal cassock with a red fur cape and this heavy red stole, and it's kind of the bells and whistles that go with with the papal cassock.
So much simpler here.
Much simpler. And one of the most significant things, he did at one point put on this stole. Now the stole is something that a priest wears to kind of symbolize the fact that whatever he's doing right now is something that he's doing in his role as priest. So he's administering a sacrament, he is giving a blessing. And he put that on just to give the blessing, and then he took it off, kissed it, and handed it to the Master of Ceremonies.
What's he trying to say by doing that?
He's doing exactly what every single priest in the world does when he takes off his stole. So he's showing that he's not on a higher level than anyone, he's not different than anyone, he's just a priest, and he just happens to be wearing white, and his congregation happens to be 1.2 billion people.
He asked, what was it, 100,000 people in St. Peter's Square to pray for Benedict. That was one of the first things he asked.
Yes.
That was different too, wasn't it?
Well, we've never had
that before, right? Because the previous pope had always died. He also asked people to pray for him before he prayed for them, which was different, I think.
And that's one of the most significant things. It's not just, I am here to give you this blessing because I'm the Pope. That, again, is putting himself on an equal level, showing that, you know what, before the eyes of God, it doesn't matter if I'm wearing a white cassock and you're not. Before the eyes of God, we are creatures of his creation who need prayers and we need help.
I wonder if we can bring that picture up one more time, because the cross he was wearing, I'm told, also had something significant about it. Again, a very simple cross as opposed to something that might have been more ornate. Can you tell us anything about that?
It's the same cross that he has worn for the last 15 years as Archbishop of Buenos Aires.
Huh.
So he chose not to pick out a new cross, a gold cross, ornate. He stuck with his simple, we don't know if it's iron or silver, simple iron cross.
Do we take all of the above that we've just talked about as a sign that there's going to be a new relationship between the church hierarchy and the laity? I
really hope so.
Because?
Well, the faith can't be credible if we don't have actions to back it up. Our Bible tells us faith without action is dead. And it's far too easy in this world to preach, to tell people what they should do, what they should think. It's another thing to actually do it. And what we're seeing is someone who actually does what he says. So he's telling people we need to focus on the poor, we need to focus on the marginalized, we need to focus on the needy. We can't get caught up in the material trappings of this world. And he does it. And he calls on his priests, the people around him, you've got to do the same. he reportedly, actually I've seen the letter, he called the Nunciatura, basically the Vatican embassy in Argentina, as soon as he was elected, and right away he told the papal ambassador in Argentina, tell the bishops not to come for my installation mass. They're not forbidden, but tell them, better than coming for my installation mass, use the money that they would have used to buy the ticket and use it to do something to help someone needy in their area.
Okay, but this was a man who lived under very modest circumstances in Argentina. We know about these stories of him riding public transit instead of going, chauffeur-driven and so on. And he's about to move into one of the most incredible mansions in the world.
Right.
How concerned are you that this may change him?
Well, I mean, given what we've seen in the last few days, I'm not too concerned. I expect that he'll have to make some adjustments. I'm not too concerned. But the other thing that gives me confidence is I've been speaking to people in Argentina. I actually just got off the phone with a priest I know in Buenos Aires who was ordained by Cardinal Bergoglio. And he assured me, he said, no, he has very firm ideas. He is very firm in his convictions. If he believes this is what's right, this is what's right. He's got a tenderness that goes along with this firmness, but he's very solid in his ideas.
Alicia, you can't be a 76-year-old person who spent his whole life in the church and not have a bit of a past. And the past that some reporters are digging into right now is the role that Cardinal Bergoglio may or may not have played as it related to, and I can't say the word in Spanish, what is it? The disappeared.
Yes.
In Argentina, the dirty wars of the 70s, and whether he, quote unquote, went to bat enough for those who are being killed by the Argentine junta. What can you tell us about that?
Well, wherever we've got the church in a situation where they're coexisting with a regime of any sort, there's always going to be questions. We saw with the same kind of thing came up with Benedict. There were issues linking him to the Hitler Youth.
We can go back to Pius XII with Hitler himself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, this is always going to happen. You're always going to have these questions because people are always going to be looking for dirt. The Holy See has issued a statement saying that there's really no credible accusations against him, that they were all made by parties belonging to what they call ultra-left-wing groups, purposefully aimed at discrediting the church. And what better way to do that than to say that the provincial, he was provincial at the time, of the Jesuit order in Argentina is conspiring with the dictatorship. So...
We're not expecting any surprises?
No.
Okay.
No.
Do you think this Pope needs to do anything about the sexual abuse scandal?
Oh, gosh. This is another one. You know what? This is another one where no matter what is done, it's never going to be enough. It will never be enough for the people who are abused. He probably does need to look through what we have been doing, make sure that it's actually working, and figure out what more do we need to do. Is there more to do? And we've heard other cardinals already say that, we've done a lot in the last few years. People can say it was too little, too late. It is what it is now. We can't go back and change that. We can only move forward, learn from the past, and move forward. But several of the cardinals have said we need to keep going on this path. We need to make sure that we have protocols in place, that they actually work. So to that end, yes, there's definitely more that he can do. The sad fact is nobody can go back and change the fact that children were abused.
We have heard this expression many times over the last few days, that the Vatican's next Pope needs to be Jesus Christ with an MBA. From what I've heard so far, I think many people are satisfied that Pope Francis is in the spirit of Jesus Christ, but he certainly doesn't have the MBA. He doesn't have any of that business experience. And we have to remember, of course, the Vatican is a huge institution / organization. I don't want to be disrespectful, but / business as well. Any fears or doubts that he won't be able to handle that side of the thing?
Maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I think we will be okay. Just because what we've seen is that this is a man who is quite practical. So I have confidence that if he doesn't know how to do something, he'll call in the right people. Now, the Jesuit thing comes into play here. The Jesuits are probably, as much as they run away from positions of power and administration, they're probably some of the better administrators when it comes to the church.
Him too?
Most likely. There's something very unique about the Jesuit formation. First of all, it's so long, and they get exposed to all different facets, all different areas of life, that by the time Jesuits are ordained priests, they can take on the world.
Yeah, but this guy's got very little experience in the Vatican itself, right?
Yes and no. I mean, yes and no. He served on several different councils, several different committees. So it's not like he's completely unprepared. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I have to say, I mean, going back to what you were asking before about him and the Argentinian government in the 70s, you know, the dictatorship, good grief, if you can deal with that, you can certainly take on the Vatican. But what I was going to say was that the Jesuit formation is actually renowned for turning out people who are among some of the best leaders. And we know that Jesuits who have left the order and who are no longer priests go on to be some of the most successful business leaders.
I have heard the observation that of all the people who they could have picked for Pope, who know where the bodies are buried, if I can use that expression, he's not one of them. You know what I mean?
Ah, yes, I see. But that could work both ways. I mean, he can then plead ignorance and kind of, you know, try to do things and try to stir things up and just say, oh, I didn't know that's how it was done. Well, we'll just do it this way for now. So I think that kind of blissful ignorance might work for him, as it'll be a good weapon. But you have to remember, he's also being left a file, a very explicit file from the previous pope that's the result of a several-month-long investigation. And it's widely believed, we don't know exactly what's in that report, but it's widely believed that there is a, you know, you referred to where the bodies are buried, there's probably a map in there lining all of that out. And it's something they're expecting him to read with a nice, you know, glass of wine or a mate, and then kind of set out and say, okay, now I know where to go.
Good. Well, we'll watch him with great interest, of course. Alicia Ambrosio, Vatican Connections host at Salt and Light TV. Thanks a lot for being here tonight.
My pleasure.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.